Come along to Critical Disability Studies at Manchester Metropolitan University. We're very lucky we're over in Canada and we're in Toronto, and it's my great pleasure to have with me today Rod Michalko. Rod, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Can I kick off just with some kind of general things around disability?
Sure.
When you think about the word disability, what kind of things crop up for you?
Well, there's a number of things. Disability is one of those words. I mean, all words have meaning, and some of them, as a sociologist, actually from Britain, once said, some words have meaning, some have a feeling. And disability is one of those words, both a meaning and a feel. So there's all sorts of meanings, as you know, that disability has in our cultures, particularly in Western society, but in all societies. And in the global North, at least, the disability comes with the meaning of inadequacy, of lack, of incompetence, of dependence, and so on. And it also comes with a feel, and the feel is typically what no one wants to be.
Right.
And so, we move through the world as disabled people, or at least some of us do, in the midst of all of these meanings and feelings.
Right. I'm glad you said moving through the world, because it brings us beautifully, effortlessly into a discussion of one of your, for me, it's a classic in disability studies, which is 2-in-1, Walking with Smokie. I've got that title right?
Walking with Blindness, walking with Smokie, walking with Blindness.
I'm glad we were both stumbling around this modern classic.
That's right.
But seriously, really, it's a classic piece of writing.
Thank you.
Can you, in a nutshell, could you capture what that book is about? What is that saying to disability?
It's saying to disability that when we move in the world, we never move alone. And in some sense, we're moving through all sorts of versions and concepts of disabilities, people who are invested in the meanings and feelings that they give to disability. And that's how disability comes to people, including disabled people, with the meanings and feelings I was talking about. So we're always in company of those things. Now, the Smokie, my guide dog, Smokie, happened to be a bit more concrete version of accompaniment in the world.
Right.
And of course, as a dog, in the book, I kind of talk about him as representing nature, whereas I represent people or society or culture or something like that. So the two are coming together in some interesting kinds of ways. Now, Smokie cares about blindness in certain ways, and so do I. And, I don't know exactly what he has in mind, nor does he know exactly what I have in mind. So that's why I speak about us moving through the world, alone and together, And it's a kind of an interesting thing, because he moved me through the world, and I moved him in the world by giving him commands left, right, etc. He decided how he was going to get to where I wanted to go, and he moved with blindness. And his concern with blindness was movement, and not just practical utilitarian movement, which all of us do, but a movement with some version of grace, or as we say in North America, some sort of class.
Nice.
So if my blindness had any class, had any oomph at all, it was because of Smokie's moving that way.
I mean, that's really. I like the word of class, but you've and notice in other work you've referred to the coolness of blindness. Oh, the blindness is cool. Can you say a bit about that? Because that's, I think, particularly from a British disability studies perspective, the notion of coolness, obviously links to kind of more affirmative ideas. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, I think this idea of cool and being cool and blindness, and for me even. I mean, I know cool doesn't come to mind when I think of blindness. I mean, in fact, it's just not cool. So then I need to think about Smokie. And he was cool. He made my blindness extremely cool. And just a simple little example about moving in the world. I walked through a bar once, and some people were playing pool.
Right.
And they sort of I said, excuse me, and they made some sort of a joke about they've got a really, really tough shot. And so I joked back saying, I might be able to make that with my white cane.
Right.
And so, one thing led to another, and I actually switched my white cane for the pool cue with this guy. And he lined up the shot, and somebody else was at the other end making sounds where the ball was, and I did hit the ball and sink it. Right. And the place erupted. Now, that was cool. Cool. Now, what was more cool was being able to move in a world where I often talk about blind people, and one of the more typical or stigmatized or common versions of blindness is the white cane and dark glasses, of course.
Yeah.
And so I often think about what's interesting is that I think as blind people we have a much cooler and clearer understanding of sight than do sighted people.
Right.
Given we need to sort of figure out what it means to see and what people can see, etc. And what's cool about that is when people look at us, when people look at blind people, and by extension at disabled people. Mm-hmm. I mean, what I think they're really looking at is themselves. They're looking at the meaning they're giving to us, the feel they have for us. And so I talk about blind people's shades as mirrored lenses. So when they're looking at us, they're looking at themselves. Now that's cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Yeah. I mean, on that kind of that notion of that. So non-disabled people are looking at disability, mm-hmm. and actually what they're doing is they're figuring out a lot about themselves. Can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think that's an interesting kind of intervention into the field, really.
Well, I think that's one of the things that disability studies has to offer the world, not just the academic world, but the world, and that is that we do look at disability. Mm. Those of us who are disabled, those of us who aren't, and particularly those people who are not disabled, mm-hmm. look at us in particular kind of ways, and we're the type of people that are to be looked at.
Right.
So that, but whether or not non-disabled people figure out whether or not they're looking at themselves is another question. But what I think disability studies, at least one of the things disability studies can offer, is non-disabled people, or the normates. Mm-hmm. We offer, or Irving Zola has a much better phrase, world of the normal. Mm-hmm. So what we offer the normals in their world is the occasion to look at themselves.
Right.
Through and in our shades. Our
right.
shades.
Well, that sounds a lot more kind of positive take in one sense on the ways in which the kind of non-disabled gaze is being conceptualised. I mean, it tends to be conceptualised in a very negative, very pathologising way. But what you seem to be saying is that actually in the gazing, this allows a possibility for re-establishing or rethinking one's sense of who one is, and also the notions of disability. Have I got that right?
I think so, and it is the occasion.
Right.
It isn't a guarantee, of course, and it's not a guarantee that me as a disabled person will take that occasion either. Mm. But those occasions are there, and those occasions are also there to speak of disability and disabled people as involved very heavily in survival. Mm-hmm. As you know, because of various kinds of conditions in the south, a lot worse than in the north, and in the north, some regions of the north a lot worse than in other regions. Mm. Nonetheless, it is an occasion. It is an occasion. Disability is here, mm-hmm. and it's not going anywhere.
Right.
In fact, if disability is going to do anything, we're going to increase in number.
Mm-hmm. Can I? Because here we are in beautiful sunny Toronto in Canada. What's your kind of sense or take upon the kind of pan-national? I suppose the question is on a pan-national assessment of disability studies. What do you think is happening, for example, in Canada that is maybe unique or kind of captures something specific about the context?
I think for me, what's specific about Canada, so far we're not called Canadian Disability Studies.
Yeah.
Whether or not we will be, I don't know. But it's we tend, it's a tendency, mm-hmm. It's not certainly homogeneous, but we tend to take a more, I think maybe I might call it a more interpretive or cultural understanding of disability, which is to say that regardless of where on earth disability is, it will be interpreted in one way or another, mm-hmm. by disabled and non-disabled others. And so we tend to take a sense of how disability is interpreted, what concepts and what versions of disabilities, mm-hmm. are brought to any engagement or face-to-face interaction with disability. Mm-hmm. I think, for example, in Britain, if I know the area well, the initial notion of the social model, mm-hmm. Which for Canadian disability studies, I would say in general, but mm-hmm. there are some particulars that aren't this way. We need to Some people say move beyond. It's not necessarily move beyond, but we need to enhance that.
Right.
Enhance that beginning with an understanding that actual people do live actual lives.
Yeah.
And these lives, some of them are disabled lives, so to speak, some of them aren't. So we need to know. I think I'll raise this question at some other point later, but we need to know, as Tanya Tichkowski says, once we're in terms of access and removing barriers, we have to ask, once we're in, what are we in for? And that's an interesting question. Yeah.
So in terms of, I mean, I suppose a British perspective has tended to emphasise disablement or disablism. Would I be right in thinking that, and I recognise it's a heterogeneous group of people, but asking you, I get in the sense that actually you're interested in those kind of concepts, but actually you're interested in disability as an opportunity to think about a lot of things. Is that fair?
I think so. Disability for me has always marked an occasion to think through what it means to be human,
right, and
what it means for, to put it, for people to live with one another in collectives, whether that collectives are individual groups of friends,
right,
cities, nations, countries, the world.
So it is, and in that sense, this I think is bringing us back to what you would define as a kind of an interpretivist position, then.
I think so.
Right. Can just for some of our viewers who may be new to kind of sociological ideas, could you say a little bit about an interpretivist approach to disability studies?
I think what I would say is that an interpretivist approach, at least as I do it and understand it, is to ask one basic, concrete question and not necessarily answer it, but respond to it, let it flow around in our minds and bodies and lives. And the question is something like this: how is it possible for us, for anyone, to say and to do what they say and do about disability?
Right. I'm going to leave that there, Rod. That's fantastic. Rod Michalko, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.